My mini sunflowers scarf is coming along. I have two pieces. My left side, where I've started with the sunflower on the right side, and I've knit all the way until I got to the I-cord. And my right side, where, as you recall, I remarked the sunflower, and I've started on the wrong side of the sunflower. But for knitting this triangle in here, this we considered the wrong side, the right side, so that we can follow the same instructions. So now we have to assemble this. We connect both of the pieces down at the I-cord end, and actually we wrap the I-cords around each other like this, and as we're picking up stitches, then we pick up the I-cord stitches along the way and continue on. But I wanted to show you something that you may have noticed yourself, and that is I've got markers along the border where I need to pick up stitches, and that is it's a guide for me in terms of how many stitches to pick up between the sections. And for this scarf we're going to pick up 1 stitch per garter ridge, and we're going to start on the right side of the work. So we are going to lay both pieces with the I-cord side toward us or toward the bottom, and like so. And I don't think you can see the whole picture here. So we are going to make sure that this sunflower right now, which we started with on the wrong side, it's flipped around. So all we have to do simply is flip it around like this, and we keep the I-cord side to the bottom. And then of course we've got the left side in here, which is already positioned the way we need it. And we're going to take our circular needle, and we're going to start picking up stitches along this edge. And when we get to this point in here, we're going to stop right here. We're not going to pick up any stitches along the I-cord itself. We're going to keep that free so that we can work with it and wrap it around. As we're picking up stitches, I like to pick up stitches through just one leg of the stitch, so just the one thing. I know people usually like to pick up 2 legs, but for this scarf I find it's sufficient that we pick up through one leg only, and I'm consistent. So for example, if I pick up this leg, then next I pick up the next one that looks like it. Or if I pick up this one in between, then the next stitch I pick up is the leg that looks like it. So the whole point is to be consistent. But there is a deviation to this rule, is when we start and when we pick up the last stitch before the I-cord, I like to pick up both legs of the stitch, and that is to keep it anchored more and not stretch that one stitch here at the edge. And similarly when we start on the right side. So to demonstrate this, I'm just gonna bring my yarn, and I'm going to start per the instructions on in your pattern. We're gonna start not right from the edge in here. We're gonna start on the 4th garter ridge. So I'm gonna count 1, 2, 3, and this is the 4th garter ridge. This is where I pick up the first stitch. So here I'm actually going to see 1, 2, 3, yeah. I'm going to pick up both legs of that stitch on the edge. Here we go. And I'm just going to bring that stitch through it. So that's my first stitch. But then from now on, what I'm going to do is I'm only going to grab one leg. So this is my first garter ridge in here. I'm gonna pick up a stitch from the next one, and I'm going to pick it from this bump in here and just move along to the next garter ridge and pick up that bump as well. I'm going to continue knitting in this manner, and when I get to a marker, I'm going to lift that marker, put it on my needle, and then I continue picking up stitches to until I get down to where the I-cord is. I am back, and I have picked up almost all the stitches. I have one more left to do in here, and because it's that last stitch that I need to pick up. If you remember, I mentioned that for this one I'm actually going to pick it up through both legs instead of just a single leg. At this point, for this first I-cord, because we want to wrap them around like this, but we don't have to do it quite yet, so we can just knit these 4 stitches first, and then when we get to the next I-cord, we'll wrap it around this first one. To do that, I'm going to identify my first stitch on the I-cord, and I know that this is my last stitch because it's got the yarn tail connected to it. And so if I look at this, this is my first stitch, and I want to start there. So you'll notice that when I start in here, it requires that I turn that I-cord a little bit. It's not too much, and you won't notice it. And so I'm going to go directly to that first stitch, and I'm going to knit it. Now, it may help if you find it hard working directly from this stitch marker. It may help to just put your stitches on a double pointed needle and then remove the marker. I don't bother because I've done it enough, so it's pretty straightforward for me. So I'm just going to knit that first stitch, and at this point I unlock my stitch marker and release that stitch off of that marker. I knit my second stitch and release that. Let's see. And then the third and the fourth, and I remove that stitch marker. Now see here, I've got I finished picking from the main body of the scarf. I got the 4 from the I-cord. What I need to do next, per the instructions, I need to cast on 2 stitches before I begin with the picking up the 4 stitches off the next I-cord. And to do that, I do the backward loop method. So with either my right thumb or with my left thumb, like so. It doesn't matter, whichever you feel comfortable with. So I'll just go with the left thumb. 1, and this is 2. So now I am ready to want to connect the next I-cord. So for this one, I'm just going to put it through that loop that I just created with that first I-cord that I picked up on my needle. So I'll just put that through like this. And remember, I want to maintain the I-cord to the bottom. Just pull it all the way through. And here again, I want to make sure that I start with the first stitch. And if you look in here, from the back. I know this is my last stitch, so my first stitch is this one right here. So here I'm actually going to move all my stitches to a cable needle just to show you, and you may be able to see it much easier this way. See, now this is my last stitch and this is my first stitch, so I want to begin with the first stitch, and I pick up my yarn and I knit 4 stitches from the I-cord, and I'm done with that. So next I'm going to go to the next point where I need to pick up stitches from this side, but I know I can't pick up any stitches off the I-cord itself. So I'm going to identify my first garter ridge, and it looks like it's like right here, and I'm going to pick up that first stitch from, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to do one thing. We need to add a marker. So here your instructions say to add a marker, so you pick up the last stitch before the I-cord here, you add a marker. That's important. We're gonna reference that marker later. Then you knit the 4 I-cord stitches that comes from the right side. You cast on 2 stitches right here, and you knit the next 4 stitches from the I-cord when after you pull it through that previous I-cord hole, and then you continue picking up stitches like you did on this side. And that's okay. We've got, this is our first stitch here. We're going to go through 2 legs like we did on the right side, and then the subsequent ones I'm only going to pick up the stitch through 1 leg only, and I continue until I get all the way to the end in here. And remember, like we did on this side, we didn't start right at the first one. We didn't start our first stitch right here. We started at 3 garter ridges, or the 4th one from the right side. And as we're picking up stitches on this side as well, we want to make sure that the last stitch we pick up is at this point in here, which is 1, 2, 3, and 3 garter ridges from the end. Before I get to the next section, I do want to note one very important thing. I had used some markers in here so that I know how many stitches to pick up between the markers, and I spaced them 20 stitches apart. Those markers are not mentioned in the pattern, and they're not important to the instructions in the pattern. However, this marker here that I placed after I finished picking up from the edge and before I picked up the first 4 stitches from the first I-cord, I placed a marker, and this marker is relevant and is referenced in the instructions. So you can take these markers off if you put some like I did, and that's not a requirement, by the way. I just like to do that myself. But the marker that's referenced in your instructions is this marker in here that's at the center of the work. And here I have picked up stitches, and I worked a couple of rows per my pattern instructions, and I am to the point where I need to begin working the short rows starting from the center of the piece. And to do that, I need to transfer stitches starting from the right side all the way until I get to 2 stitches before that center marker that I placed when I picked up stitches. So here I am. I'm 2 stitches from that center marker, and I'm going to begin my setup rows right now, and the setup rows are also in your instructions, just following my pattern. At this point I don't need this marker anymore, so I just discard it and work my first short row. And again, I'm actually following the pattern, and since I've knit this a few times, I have it memorized. So I'm going a bit fast for now. 2 more stitches, and I'm going to make a yarn over, knit 2 stitches like my pattern says, turn my work around, and I'm going to purl 2, and this yarn over that I made, then I'm going to purl it through the back loop and purl all the way to where I started. I started here, then I'm going to make another yarn over, bring the yarn to the front and purl 2. Now I am finished with this color for now. I'm going to begin working from chart, and I'm going to work with the first chart is chart C for this section, and basically I am following my chart, and I'm going to knit 2, knit 1 through the back loop, and then I'm going to slip 2 stitches with the yarn in back. I'm setting up for when I start working my honeycomb stitches, and then I'm going to knit 4 stitches and slip 2. Again, I'm working per pattern in here. And when I get to the point in here, I make a yarn over. This is my last turn. I make a yarn over and I knit 2. Then I turn my work, and here I want to show you what I'm going to do with this yarn, with this the first yarn that I used. The whole point of me knitting these rows is to show you what to do with this yarn at the end of this row here, this wrong side row. So I'm going to knit 2, purl 2, purl through the back loop, and again this is per my pattern, and these 2 stitches that I slipped on the right side, I slip again on the wrong side, slip these again, and notice how when I slip these stitches I leave long floats. You don't want these too tight, you want to have enough floats because you don't want the work to be too tight. And try to be consistent here when you slip these stitches. Ideally you want to keep the same tension, and usually to guarantee a long float, I just spread my work on my right needle and then purl, and in this way I get this long float in here. So here I am coming to the turn, and I'm going to make a yarn over, then I'm going to purl. But since I want to carry this yarn, uh, I'm going to be working with this yarn on the next row. I want to trap it on this last stitch, so I just insert the needle as if to purl, like I would normally purl that switch, and then bring that yarn over that needle and just purl. And this way I just have this yarn trapped in here. See if you can see how the yarn is trapped in here, and I don't have a long float, and it looks neat on the wrong side of the work. So then when I turn my work and begin knitting, I've got obviously this yarn in the right position now. And by the way, this is the same action you do when you get to the end of the row on the with this main color. You trap this other color. So you do that every time you're switching colors. So here I'm going to knit 2, knit 1 through the back loop, and knit 1, and then I'm going to work my first cable. And you'll notice here I am not using a cable needle, and I highly recommend that you do not either, because using a cable needle in here is going to be very time consuming. So I'm going to show you how to work the cables without using a cable needle. Here I want to make a 1x2 cable. I want the stitch here to come to the right in the front, and the 2 stitches in this teal color or the contrast color to go to the left in the back. So to do this, I knit that stitch, I go over these 2 stitches, insert my needle through that stitch and knit it. And obviously right now I'm going to keep it here because I have these 2 stitches in the way. So to solve this problem, I knit these 2 stitches one at a time, release them off the needle, and when I'm done, this stitch can be released. And this way I made my cable without using a cable needle. On the other side, it's a little bit it's an extra step, but I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make my cable with this stitch in here going to the left and to the front over these 2 stitches. I'm going to knit the first stitch. I'm going to slip the first stitch knitwise. I'm going to slip the next 2 stitches together knitwise, like that. And then I'm going to take my needle to the front and slip these 2 stitches kind of like this onto my left needle, and then I'm going to work them in order. So knit 2, knit 1, and I made my cable. So let me repeat this one more time. In this stitch in here, I want to bring it to the right and over. So I'm going to knit it from the front, keep it on the needle because these 2 stitches are in the way. Then I'm going to knit these 2 stitches in order and release all 3 stitches. Then when I'm going to make my left 1x2 to the left, which means that this one is going to be to the left while these 2 stitches are going to go behind it to the right. I'm going to slip knitwise, slip the next 2 stitches knit together knitwise, come to the front and insert my needle like so through all 3 stitches together and transfer them to my left needle. Then knit them in order as they show on the left needle. Here we go. We made a couple of cables. Well, we made actually 4 cables without using a cable needle. as you continue to work on your center honeycomb section, you will run into situations where you need to make a left crossing or a right crossing cable where a yarn over is involved. And this will typically happen in the beginning of the row. So when you get to it, you will consider that yarn over as a stitch. Here I going to start by knitting one stitch, and I'm going to get to the point where I need to make a left crossing cable. And even though you'll notice in here I have 3 stitches with the contrast color, this contrast color that I've been working with, I'm going to make the cable anyway, and I'm also going to consider this yarn over as a normal stitch. So I'm going to execute my cable with the technique I've learned. So I'm going to slip that first stitch knitwise, slip the next 2 stitches, which one of them is a yarn over, together knitwise. I'm going to transfer them back to the left needle and then knit them in order. So this is a yarn over, but it's not gonna matter whether I cross it or not, so I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to knit it straight, and then I'm going to continue knitting. I am almost finished with my little scarf in here, and I have one last thing I'd like to show you, and that is on the last row before we bind off. On this row I have 2 stitches left from the stitches I picked up originally to begin the center, and you will have 3 stitches left. No matter what, if you have 2, 3 or 4, just go ahead and knit those stitches like I did. Then pick up 2 stitches from the edge that, or rather the 3 garter ridges that we left that we didn't use at the beginning to pick up stitches from. And when you pick up the stitches in here, make sure that you go under 2 loops, and then turn your work around, and here we are going to bind off the stitches using knit 2 together bind off method. And I'm going to start by slipping that first stitch, knit the next stitch, then knit 2 together through the back loop, knit, and knit 2 together through the back loop. So I'm going to continue this process until I get to the end of the row. So I'm going to scoot over to the end of the row, and then here basically you're going to bind off all the stitches, and then you're going to have 1 stitch left on your needle. Go ahead and pick up 2 stitches and bind them off as well, like we did on this side in here. So you're just going to get here, you'll have 1 stitch left, then pick up a stitch and bind it off, pick up another stitch and bind it off, and then you're finished. So this is it with the sunflowers scarf. I hope that you enjoy knitting this project as much as I enjoyed designing it. Thank you so much for staying with me on this, and happy knitting.